May accused in Parliament of changing her mind on Brexit and risking a bargain basement Britain. She told Europe to play fair or risk a low-tax trade war. Labour's leader said that was beneath her.
She demeans herself and her office and our country's standing by making these kind of threats.
It's called leadership. He should try it sometime.
Also this lunchtime, tour companies prepare to evacuate hundreds of British tourists from the Gambia under threat of civil war. A partial victory for wheelchair bus passengers, but it still depends on other people's goodwill. And can you guess who it is? We reveal the latest public figure to adorn Madame Tussauds.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. Jeremy Corbyn accused the Prime Minister of threatening a bargain basement Britain, of snubbing Parliament by delivering her 12-point plan to a gathering of diplomats and journalists first, and of demeaning her office. Well, Mrs May said he lacked a plan and was incapable of leadership, claiming her plan would see Britain thrive at the forefront of the world economy. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary warned the French President not to hand out World War-style punishment beatings to a Britain seeking to leave the EU. Brexit is not going to be diplomatic nor easy, as our political correspondent Emily Morgan reports.
Are you playing hardball, Prime Minister?
No reaction to that, but if her speech yesterday gave Theresa May a sleepless night, you wouldn't know it. Leaving for the House of Commons this morning, she appeared relaxed. And unsurprisingly, her Brexit strategy dominated Prime Minister's question time. Jeremy Corbyn accused her of snubbing Parliament.
Restoring parliamentary democracy while sidelining Parliament. Mr Speaker, it's not so much the Iron Lady as the Irony Lady.
What I set out yesterday was a plan for a global Britain, bringing prosperity to this country and jobs to people and spreading economic growth across the country.
Mr Corbyn went on to suggest that threatening Europe, if Mrs May got a bad deal, demeans the UK.
Can I urge her to stop her threat of a bargain basement Brexit? A low-pay tax haven on the shores of Europe. It won't necessarily damage the EU, but it would certainly damage this country, businesses, jobs and public service. She demeans herself and her office.
Yet again, I say to the right honourable gentleman, there is indeed a difference between us. It's very simple. When I look at the issue of Brexit, or indeed at any other issue like the National Health Service or social care, I consider the issue, I set out my plan, and I stick to it. It's called leadership. He should try it sometime.
Many headlines this morning agreed Mrs May had shown leadership. Newspapers, though, in Europe mocked the UK and the Prime Minister's willingness for a clean divorce. Of course, negotiations haven't yet started, and crucially, success in getting a deal will depend on consent from European leaders. French President Hollande warned the UK shouldn't expect a better trading relationship with the EU after Brexit. It prompted this rebuttal from the Foreign Secretary.
I think that if Monsieur Hollande wants to administer punishment beatings to anybody who chooses to escape, rather in the manner of some sort of World War II movie, then I don't think that is the way forward.
Britain's relationship with the EU after the referendum was always going to be tested. The question is, will it be tested to breaking point?
So, Emily, ill-tempered exchanges there, but do you think that Boris Johnson's gone too far in talking about World War II-style punishment beatings?
Well, it was quite an extraordinary intervention from Boris Johnson. Commentators are accusing him of likening President Hollande to Nazi Germany. His office, the Foreign The Foreign Office has issued a statement flatly denying that. They have said that he wasn't suggesting anything of the sort and never used the word Nazi. But the moment you start using phrases like punishment, beatings and World War II in the same sentence, it's bound to cause some controversy. That aside, a reaction from Europe over the speech itself has been pretty conciliatory this morning. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has said he's promised good results, and Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, has said that she's pleased to have some clarity. Finally, as a starting point, that's not a bad place for Theresa May, who's under huge pressure to ultimately get what she wants.
Emily, thank you. A mass evacuation of British tourists in the Gambia is underway after new Foreign Office travel advice. More than 1,000 holidaymakers will be flown out over the next 48 hours after the country's recent disputed election increased the threat of civil war. Martha Fairley with the latest.
So I've got a list.
It's not what these holidaymakers wanted to hear.
It's not a very good news. It's basically that we are going to evacuate everyone back home today. Today? Yes, today.
Their luxury break in the Gambia is being cut short. A state of emergency has been declared in the tiny West African state, and thousands of tourists are being evacuated.
I thought everything would go smoothly, but now with everybody panicking, I'm beginning to panic myself.
I think I'd rather be home than something terrible happen.
Staff have been fantastic here, keeping calm. But it's a front, you can see it in people's eyes, they're quite scared.
Gambia's president, Yahya Jammeh, who's been in power since a coup in 1994, is due to step down after losing an election last month. But he's refusing to hand over power to President-elect Adama Barrow. Yesterday, he banned acts of disobedience.
Today, the 17th of January, 2017, hereby declare a state of public emergency.
And with this former Commonwealth country now in the grip of a political crisis, thousands of Gambians, including government ministers, are fleeing to Senegal.
It's an uncertain situation in the Gambia at the moment, and I think if the government and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in particular are advising that people should come home, then that's what they should do.
Thomas Cook's putting on extra flights to get some of the 3,500 British tourists home, and with a high risk of military intervention and civil disturbance, the Foreign Office is advising against all non-essential travel. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
With 51 hours to go until Donald Trump is sworn in as America's president, a Democrat Party boycott of his inauguration is gathering pace. 54 congressmen and women will now stay away in protest at his business practices and treatment of a civil rights campaigner. But Mr. Trump has shrugged off their decision, continuing his preparations last night during a brief trip to the American capital. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore has the latest.
Last night, Donald Trump made an unexpected visit to Washington, ahead of the inauguration celebrations that begin tomorrow. In comments to ambassadors, it was a mix of goodwill and praise for his own selection of cabinet members.
We have great respect for your countries. We have great respect for our world. We have put together a team, I think the likes of which has never been assembled before. So. Shut it down! Shut it down!
But there are sights and sounds he will become familiar with as he travels around Washington in the next few days. Hell no! Protests are certain to build ahead of the swearing-in ceremony. No Trump! And a huge march against his presidency is planned for Saturday. On breakfast television this morning, Trump again denied that the Russians are holding any compromising material that could be used to blackmail him.
It's made up, never existed, never happened. And the reason I say that so strongly, because nothing's ever going to show up. There's never going to be a tape that shows up. There's never going to be anything that shows up. Now, I would be very embarrassed if a tape actually showed up saying something like that. It would be double embarrassed because I'm saying it. There is no tape. There is no event. I was never even in that room for that period of time.
The preparations for the inauguration are now nearly complete. A ritual of democracy that will play out in a fiercely divided country. More than 50 members of Congress are boycotting the ceremony and questioning the very legitimacy of America's 45th president.
And I will work with them where we can, but I just didn't want to go celebrate or legitimize or normalize his presidency. You know, we have sore losers before, but this is really the first sore winner we've ever had.
Donald Trump is now just 2 days away from assuming power, promising major changes to how America does business at home and around the world.
A growing boycott, Robert, of what you call a ritual of democracy. Is it going to have any long-term implications?
Well, Alistair, you know, characteristically, Donald Trump is kind of brushing it off with near contempt, saying, look, actually, he's very relaxed about this boycott, saying actually he would like to have the tickets from those congressmen and women and redistribute them to his own supporters. But look, behind the scenes, it is troubling. It does raise potentially questions of legitimacy about his presidency, as we've discussed. It's not just about these 50 or so congressmen who are boycotting the events here on Capitol Hill. It's the fact that, of course, Donald Trump lost the popular vote in November's election and lost it by some margin. It's also the fact that Donald Trump is becoming president with the lowest approval rating ever of a president-elect. So it does all illustrate the kind of the chasm at the heart of American politics. Normally we'd expect some goodwill towards a president-elect. There is absolutely no evidence of that in these days.
And the outgoing President Obama holding his final press conference later today, but making headlines to the very end.
Yeah, he always said he would make headlines until the end, so it's proving. Yesterday he announced that he would commute the 35-year prison sentence of Chelsea Manning. Now, Chelsea Manning, you may remember, is the former US Army intelligence officer who gave a treasure trove of America's most sensitive military and diplomatic secrets to WikiLeaks. And there's an irony in all this, of course. Chelsea Manning helped put WikiLeaks on the map. WikiLeaks is also the very same organization that released information on Hillary Clinton, may have tipped the election towards Donald Trump and made sure that on Friday he takes the oath of office here in just 48 hours or so.
Robert, thank you. And we'll have a special programme on those events that Robert was just describing. Join Tom Bradbury for President Trump, the inauguration. Our coverage beginning at 4 p.m. Here, the mobile phone firm EE has been fined £2.7 million for overcharging tens of thousands of customers who called its service line. An investigation by the telecom watchdog Ofcom found that the company made fundamental billing mistakes. Well, our consumer editor Chris Choi is with me. What does that mean?
Not just one mistake, but at least two. This is Britain's biggest mobile network with more than 24 million subscribers. Let me take you through the detail of exactly what went wrong behind the scenes. First, customers who were away in Europe and who called that EE customer service line you mentioned on 150 between July 2014 and 2015 were mistakenly charged £1.20 instead of just 19p. So 32,145 customers were overcharged around £245,700. Next, people who called the so-called free-to-call 150 line when they were visiting other EU countries, of them 7,674 were wrongly charged, £2,203 in total, and EE, after all that, was unable to refund nearly 7,000 of them because they've since changed providers. Well, here is what the phone's watchdog had to say about all this.
Well, we all place our trust in big companies to get the most fundamental thing right, and that's getting our phone bills right. And we found that EE had broken our billing rules not just once, but on two separate occasions. That's clearly completely unacceptable.
But £2.7 million, and you say these are the biggest providers in the UK. It's a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
I mean, for most people, 2.7 million seems a huge amount, but you're right, the context here. This company, EE, was recently valued at £12.5 billion. I asked Ofcom about this. They say it is the right fine because EE did not act deliberately. This was carelessness or negligence, and they say most people have been refunded. If you think you've been affected and haven't had your money back, contact EE. That's the message this lunchtime.
Those nearly 7,000 they're still looking for.
Absolutely, yes.
Chris, as always, thank you. Still to come, why thousands of grandparents could be losing hundreds of pounds in tax credits every year. And guess who? We're at London's most famous waxworks for the inauguration, there's the clue, of its latest model. But first, if you're a regular bus user, you may have witnessed disagreements over who's entitled to use the space between the steps and the chairs. Often used by buggies, it's actually a designated wheelchair area. Well, today a disabled man has won a partial victory at the Supreme Court after a dispute on a bus with a mother. As Francesca Carpenter explains, it means bus drivers may have to do more to accommodate wheelchair users.
Doug Pooley arrived in London this morning, headed to the Supreme Court for a battle that's been going on for 5 years. It started in 2012 when a mother with a sleeping baby in a pram refused to move from the wheelchair area, leaving Doug stranded at the bus stop. Today, he and many other disabled travellers claimed a significant victory after the court ruled bus drivers must do more to make sure wheelchair users can get on.
I feel really pleased with today's decision. 5 years of fighting for myself, for disabled people's organisations. It's really great to get a positive decision that will hopefully make a difference in some way to disabled people's rights of access to public transport.
Today's ruling states that bus drivers should consider further steps to pressurise non-wheelchair users to move. But bus company First Group says there needs to be more clarity.
We still have a situation, if somebody's refusing to move, we cannot carry the wheelchair user. So in that respect, we have not moved forward. Disabled people are saying this is confusing, and that's never good. We need clarity, our drivers need clarity, and our passengers need clarity, so everyone knows what they should be doing.
But many people here today see the ruling as a major milestone.
It means that they will now have priority in relation to spaces on buses, and it will put an end to the first come, first served approach.
Doug says he hopes today will make a big difference for disabled travellers around the country. Francesca Carpenter, ITV News.
Unemployment's fallen to its lowest level for more than a decade. Official figures out today say that 1.6 million people were out of work in the 3 months to November. That's down 52,000. Average earnings were up by 2.8% over the year. Now, if you've given up your job to look after your grandchildren, you could be missing out on national insurance credits worth thousands of pounds. Claiming specified adult childcare credits boosts your state pension by an extra £231 a year, which is worth around £4,600 over a 20-year retirement, for example. But fewer than 1,300 people claimed them last year, even though as many as 100,000 could be entitled to them. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined live now by Dr. Lucy Peake, the Chief Executive of the charity Grandparents Plus. Lots of numbers in that explanation. First, factually sound. Who specifically then can get out there and claim this?
So this is for grandparents who are under the retirement age, who are not working or working very few hours and are looking after their grandchildren.
Yeah. And how do they go about doing it?
So they need to apply to HMRC. There's lots of information on our website, grandparentsplus.org.uk. When they do the application form, they need to get their the working parent to sign that as well. So basically, the parent is transferring the credit to the grandparent.
Right, OK, so it's not suddenly something new that's been discovered. It's one of it, not unlike the married person's allowance. This is something that's come back in and can be swapped between people as best suits people.
Absolutely. It recognises that really crucial role that grandparents play in enabling parents to go back to work. There's about 9 million grandparents who are providing childcare in this country, and we think around 100,000, as you said, would be eligible for this credit.
And the final point that some folk listening to that may think, oh, that's good, but I've actually qualified over the edge and so on for some time. It can be backdated over what period, and is it the same methodology?
You're absolutely right. It can be backdated to 2011, and you need to just
5 years worth.
Make that application. So if you want to find out if you're eligible, go to our website, have a look, and then you can make that application and get it backdated. OK, now, your charity is Grandparents Plus. Are there any other areas like this that you're looking at the moment? Because we all know, we report on it regularly, that folk in their later years are up against financial pressures and what have you. This is great news for some. Are there other areas they might be worth looking into? We really want more recognition for what grandparents do in general. They're playing this critical role for working families, but also the wider economy. So longer term, as more grandparents are likely to be working as the retirement age goes up, we need government and employers really to be thinking, what does this mean for society? How do we support families? How do we support the grandparents to enable people to work?
Right. Lucy Peake, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Now, tennis and British number 3 Dan Evans has caused a major surprise at the Australian Open of a good sort. The 26-year-old is in the form of his life and today knocked out 7th seed Marin Cilic to progress to round 3. It's only the second time Evans has beaten a player ranked in the world's top 10. Meanwhile, Andy Murray made light work of his second-round win over the Russian Andrei Rublev, winning in straight sets. Finally, many of us would be fascinated to meet the next President of the United States in the flesh. Well, now you can, sort of. A new waxwork of President-elect Donald Trump, who takes office on Friday, has just been unveiled at Madame Tussauds Museum in London. And Susan Verde is there for us right now. Suzanne, over to you and himself.
Yes, you get to see him first because he's only just been revealed to the press. And I have to say, standing this close, he's a dead ringer for the man himself. And that's no surprise because experts have been painstaking their attention to detail to capture his expression and get his hair just right. In fact, they imported yak's hair so they could recreate accurately the Trump trademark bouffant. Well, I'm joined by Alex Cameron now. How easy or difficult was it to recreate the president-elect here?
Well, as you said, it's taken a team of 20 artists over 6 months to create this figure. And to give you an idea of the level of detail involved, every strand of hair is inserted one by one, and a pair of eyes is painted in watercolour, and them alone take about 10 hours.
Wow. Now, he's a Marmite character. How much of a distraction do you think he's going to be here?
You know, I think it's absolutely vital that we have Donald Trump here at Madame Tussauds London. He's going to go down in history as one of the world's most talked about politicians. So I think, guess whether you like him or whether you don't support him, I think it's going to be irresistible for them to come here and get a selfie with Donald.
And what about security? Are you concerned about anti-Trump protesters?
You know, the essence of Madame Tussauds is that we're fully interactive. There's no red ropes, no barriers. Guests are welcome to come up and literally put their hands on their heroes. So I think it's absolutely fine, and our employees will always keep an eye on all of our figures to ensure that everyone's being completely respectful.
Alex, thank you very much. Well, we'd no idea what Mr. Trump thinks of it. He does know about it, apparently. You can judge for yourselves. He goes on a show tomorrow morning.
All right, Suzanne, thank you very much indeed. And that is it for now. The evening news is next at 6:30, but from us, bye-bye.